Hello and welcome to Bole, the podcast. Thank you for joining us again on the new episode. I'm Ramesh Satasivam, one of your co-hosts. In today's episode, we have Dr. Ranjit Singh Malhi. Dr. Malhi is an independent historian and an adjunct professor at Asia Pacific University of Technology and Innovation. He has authored many books, including the most recently published Sikhs in Malaysia, a comprehensive history. A book that highlights the many contributions of the Sikh community in Malaysia and provides us with details of various aspects of the community's history in our country. For this episode, I'll be joined by my co host, the ever jovial Ranjit Singh.
Welcome, everybody, to Bole the podcast. I'm happy to be here with Ramesh today, interviewing the eminent historian and coincidentally my namesake, Dr. Ranjit Singh Malhi.
All right. First and foremost, I would like to sincerely thank Bole the podcast for giving me this singular privilege and honor to make a presentation on the history of Malaysian Sikhs. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ranjit. Before we go on to your book that you recently published, for the benefit of our listeners, Dr. Ranjit, you may want to tell us a bit about yourself, like what got you interested in history and why chose the path of a historian.
Oh, thank you, Ramesh. Before that, let me provide a brief background about myself, because I'm more, whether fortunately or unfortunately, I'm more known as a historian. But actually, I also like people to know that professionally, I'm a management consultant, all right? And people are not aware of that. And I actually started my company, which is called TQM Consultants, way back in 1990. And that I've written 7 books on management and personal development, of which 3 have been translated into Arabic and are bestsellers in the Middle East. Now, as an independent historian, I have written 19 books on Malaysian, Asian, and world history. And currently, my most important project is to write a truthful, comprehensive, and inclusive history of Malaysia based upon authoritative sources. And back to your question, Ramesh, what made me interested in history? Well, I loved history since my school days. I was a top student in my school, in upper secondary and then Form 6. And even in University of Malaya, my results were good enough to join the law faculty. But my dream was to become a professor of history. But fate took a funny twist, because when I finished my degree, I had a second class upper in history from University of Malaya. I eagerly ran to the head of department, indicating that I would like to join the history department. But this is interesting. You know what they told me? We already have too many Indians in the faculty. All right. And at that time, the NEP was taking shape. All right. So they wanted more Bumiputras to be in. I said, no problems. So then I joined the civil service as part of the Administrative and Diplomatic Service in 1977. In 1990, I quit. All right.
Right.
And right now, I'm back again to history because there is a need to write a truthful account of our history. All right. So I will stop at that.
Yes, and from what you just said, Dr. Ranjit, I guess that when they told you that they have too many Indians in the faculty, maybe one of your inspirations to actually write about the history of the Sikhs in Malaysia.
Sorry, I missed that.
I mean, you mentioned just now that when you wanted to join the faculty of University of Malaya, and they said there were too many Indians in the faculty. I guess
Right.
that could be one of the reasons why you decided to write the book, your recent book about the Sikhs in Malaysia and a comprehensive history.
Okay, not really, Ramesh, but let me explain what made me write the history of my own community in Malaysia. All right, and I'll be very sincere here. There are actually 2 reasons. All right, one actually was my late father's wish. All right, my dad He retired from the police force as a sergeant. He told me, son, you must record the history of our community. That was his dream. And my only regret is I could not do it while he was still alive.
Yeah.
Right? And sorry, getting a bit emotional. Okay. That was my father's dream. And the second dream, the second reason for me writing this book, I would also like to be very honest here. It was actually, I would like to leave a legacy behind. So I would like to be known as the first Malaysian Sikh who wrote the history of his own community, a comprehensive history based on authoritative sources. So these were the two things that actually drove me to work on this book. And it's actually also to share, it's actually, Ranjit and Ramesh, this is a labor of love. I actually spent 10 years,
Wow.
All right.
Well,
And
we
there's a
see the labor of love.
labor
We
of
can
love.
see
Yeah.
the labor of love because I was just going to ask you the amount of where did you find the material, right? Your research material, because a lot of this material you won't be able to find in ordinary sources.
Yes. Brilliant question, Ranjit. Very good. I like that question. Now, honestly, I was also shocked with the amount of information that I got. Okay. And let me share some real experiences, the frustrations, the joy. I made 2 trips to India. All right. I went to the National Archives in India. Then I went to the Nehru Memorial Library, and God was on my side. I discovered valuable material untouched, completely unknown. We shall be talking later about the involvement of the Malayan Sikhs in the Gadar movement. Because everybody, whenever you talk about Sikhs in Malaya, they are the most loyal citizens of the British Empire and all that. No, that was shocking. That is one. The other one was I went to Singapore, their archives, and also the National University of Singapore. There were valuable materials, especially the Colonial Office records. And I was fortunate that while I was doing my first degree, way back in the 1970s, I took the initiative to interview Sikhs who were living at that time in the 1970s. So that was a very valuable source of information, Ranjit. Because right now, if somebody were to do, you will not get all those information. In fact, at that time, I managed to dig first-hand information from Sikhs who were involved in the anti-British movements. So that was a very, very valuable source of income. All right.
Right. So basically, do you encounter any form of obstacle in your research? I mean, was there could you not? Was it very easy to access all these archives and the source of information, or was there a
Okay.
stumbling block that
The stumbling block was when it came to one aspect of the history. We were talking about the Punjabi newspapers.
Mm,
There are no copies of the first 3 Punjabi newspapers of
no.
Malaya because the first one started in 1918. So there are no published copies. But thank God, I managed to write whatever I could based on oral interviews. The people who actually read the newspapers and all that, so I got information from there.
Mhm.
So that was one. And the other thing was, I had a very funny experience in the National Archives of India because they work. Okay, I think I will not say this. Sorry. Not very
Okay,
positive.
we'll
All right.
leave it for private conversation over here.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
we'll leave it for another time then.
Right. That's a good one,
Right.
Ranjit. Okay.
Right. Now, I mean, when I read your book, it was interesting to say that that you actually started from the beginning. The arrival of the Sikhs in Malaysia, and I think that's
Right.
really a good place to start. From the beginning, and the immigration of the Sikh community from India to Malaysia, how it all began. Well, really, that time, Malaya, and why Malaya? There could be any other countries within the Southeast Asia region, but why Malaya?
Thank you, Ramesh. Now, before I answer that question, I think it'll be good for the viewers later to know. Let me give me a broad history of Sikh immigration to. We'll use the word Malaysia, which is currently Malaya then, which is Peninsular Malaysia now, Sabah and
Yes.
Sarawak. Now, this because then I will also share that through my research. This is also very interesting, Ranjit and Ramesh. While I conducted research, I also corrected a lot of factual errors. That's the interesting part of research. When you really do solid research, you'll pick up the errors made by others, and also maybe some is just admitted to their mistakes. Some they did not. They were not meticulous enough to look into the source. But let me just explain now. There were actually three phases of immigration into Peninsular Malaysia, which was Malaya then, all right? So it started from the 1870s to the mid-1920s. First phase, 1870s to the mid-1920s, and then late 1920s till the end of the Second World War, 1946, and then 1947 till 1957. Then talking about Sabah, the Sikhs first came in large numbers in the 1880s. In Sarawak, in 1890s. All right. Now, this is the interesting part. People always ask, because the Sikhs are well known for being part of the British paramilitary force. All right. Who were the first Sikh policemen in Malaya, the recruits? This is very interesting. I discovered, but this was my research in the National Archives of India. Now, a lot of people have the wrong idea that 110 Sikh recruits were recruited from Lahore. Actually, not 110, 95. All right, 95 were recruited by Captain Speedy in 1873. Okay, and the second mistake that a lot of people make is they say most of the sepoys recruited were Sikhs. Not true. Most of the sepoys recruited were Pathans. All right, Pathans. All right, Sikhs form a small number. So the first Sikhs that Captain Speedy recruited 95 discharged sepoys from Lahore, which actually comprised majority Pathans, Sikhs, and then Punjabi Muslims. Okay, so that was the first. In fact, that marks, this is very interesting, people don't know, that marks the beginning of the Royal Malaysian Police Force.
Yeah.
Right? In Larut, people are not aware of that. No, that's the beginning, okay? And then from there, because the Sikhs performed very well, they were recruited. They made the first part of the police force in Perak. Okay, and then what happened was, because of their distinctive service, in 1877 the Perak police force was renamed the Perak Armed Police. All right, and later in 1884 it was known as the 1st Battalion Perak 6. Okay, so that was in Perak. Now, because of success in Perak, then it went on. Sikhs were recruited into Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, and also the Unfederated Malay States. So the Sikhs were everywhere. By 1914, when British rule was complete in Malaya, because the British advisor was appointed to Johor in 1914, the Sikhs are very interesting. The Sikhs formed half of the police force.
Wow.
All right, this is actually not covered. Sorry, I'll be very open about this. It's not mentioned at all in our history book. You know, the role of the Sikhs. You know, just to share this, without peace and security, economic growth is impossible.
Yes.
All right, so this is where we have to acknowledge. You know, all right, the roles of yes, Ranjit.
The interesting. You mentioned that Captain Speedy, Larut, Perak, right? Was this introduction of this force of Sikhs, Pathans, and Punjabi Muslims related to the Larut wars that were then ongoing?
Oh, you sorry, Ranjit, and I'm not trying to apple polish. You definitely know your history, brother. All right? Yes. Let me explain. Since you asked, I'll explain. Actually, Captain Speedy recruited the sepoys under the wish of the territorial chief of Larut, which was Ngai Ibrahim, to bring about peace, because there was wars between two of these secret societies, the Gihin and the Haisan.
Yeah,
all right.
That's something we did study in history, by the way. We did study this in history.
Okay, we studied it back in Form 2.
Right.
I can't remember when, but we did.
But right now, there's nothing at all in the in our history books. just to
Yeah.
share.
Very
Nothing at all.
sad.
Yep, it's very
No,
sad.
no. Are you saying that there's no mention of the Gihin Haisan fights
Oh, that
or
got that
the
fight's
Thin
got.
Mines? Yeah.
Yes, that is mentioned, but nothing about the Captain Speedy recruiting and the Sikhs and the Pathans. No,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I missed the second part, which where you wanted. Why Malaya?
Yes.
Right, Ramesh,
Yeah.
sorry, why Malaya? Now,
Yeah.
very interesting. Uh, the best way to explain is the push and the pull factors.
Yeah.
That theory is very simple, push and pull. Now, the push factor is very simple. It was actually poor economic conditions in Punjab. And why poor economic conditions in Punjab? There was peasant indebtedness. A lot of lands were mortgaged. Let me give an example. By 1891, 4 million acres of land in the districts of Jalandhar and Hoshiarpur was under mortgage. Right?
Mm.
Because a lot of Sikhs migrated from areas which were under poverty and all that. And to make things worse, there were the famines of 1896, 97, 1899, 1900. All right, food became scarce and prices spiral. Then there were also the droughts. All right, 1905 and 07. Okay, and the rapid increase in population. Because the rapid increase in population, the land holdings became uneconomical. All right, so now this is very interesting. So the Sikhs were forced to look for greener pastures outside. Now, this is a very interesting point which many people are not aware, but this credit is not to be given to me. This credit actually given to some other writers who first propounded the theory that the Sikhs who came to Malaya, they were not the poorest of the poor. Okay, they were what they use the term middling wealth. So, because you know why? Let me explain. Very interesting again. Why? Because you must have enough money to pay for the passage.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And research done in Malaysia by Professor Manjit Singh, Manjit, he has proven through interviews, he did a very good job here, where 2/3 of the Sikhs who immigrated to Malaya, they came from families who own 10 acres or more of land.
Oh.
So this fact is not known by many people. All right. So they could afford that. Now, why Malaya? Now, this is very interesting. Why Malaya? Now, first thing was because of the British colonial rule. All right. They needed the necessary personnel in the paramilitary force. Okay. And the Sikhs were renowned as a martial race way back in Punjab. That's number one. Number two was the attractive economic opportunities in Malaya. All right. The stories will go back to the village. You want to make money, you want to do well, go to Malaya. Malaya everywhere, you got rubber, you throw this inside, got tin mine. Right?
Yeah.
So, right?
Right.
Maybe
Natural
share
resources were abundant in Malaya back then.
Correct. And then also the almost similarity in climate and a favorable climate in Malaya. And finally, gentlemen, this is also very important. There was a very reliable transportation route. All right.
Yeah.
So the Sikhs at that time, the port of this port of embarkation was Calcutta. So the Sikhs will travel all the way by train from Punjab
across India, all the way across India.
Correct.
Wow.
West to east. Wow.
Correct. Ranjit, I think you can take over lah.
No. Then they just come down the Bay of Bengal and down into Penang.
Down to
when they
yeah, that's right.
I am honored to be interviewed by two also historians. You all know your job. All right. Yes. And that time the ports were Penang and then the main one Singapore.
Right.
Okay. So that wraps up why Malaya. And in fact, sorry, just another very important point. Among the South Asian countries, Malaya was the most preferred choice of destination because maybe partly I think it was the British rule. There was more stability and all that. And the British, it was their policy. We'll come to that. It was their policy to hire the Sikhs as part of the paramilitary force.
Right, and because of the economical situation back in Punjab, as you mentioned earlier, right, there was also discontent. What I say, there was discontent with the English rule in Punjab itself that caused them to migrate.
Yes, that's a very valid point. that was a reason, but that was a later part, not the
Right.
beginning. That was in the second and the third decades of the 20th century.
Right. And when the Sikhs migrated in the earlier part of the first part of the migration, did they come with their families, or they just came by themselves, or
Okay, the initial wave of Sikhs, they were bachelors. They came alone.
Right.
All right. And this is very true of the police force, because at that time the British did not have quarters for married
Right.
personnel, right? Only later, but this is interesting because the British really wanted them, and when the Sikhs asked that that they're allowed to bring their wives, their family along, the British allowed, and then police barracks were built. All right, so later they came in together with that. Yes.
Right. And interestingly enough, like you said, Dr. Ranjit, that
Yeah.
the British recruited the Sikhs primarily for police force in colonial Malaya back then.
Right.
Right. And that will of course assume that the Sikhs are loyal subjects to the British Crown. But sentiments, I mean, in chapter 3 of your book, there was then talk of anti-British sentiments, and what gave life to this anti-British sentiment, given that they were loyal British subjects and they were hired by the colonial masters to come down here.
Okay. Thank you, Ramesh. Now, this is a very interesting question. And incidentally, I've just finished writing an article on
Right.
the Gadar movement, which is to be published in a well-known international journal, Sikh Formations. And this is one aspect of Malaysian Sikh history that will shock every Sikh. Nobody was really aware of this Gadar movement. All right. So let me explain. This Gadar movement is very important. All right. Now, the Gadar movement actually is based on the Gadar Party. The Gadar Party was formed in 1913 in USA. All right. And its objective was to expel the British from India through an armed insurrection. Okay. And it had the support of the Sikhs overseas, especially in US, Canada, and Malaya, and also China. All right, so they support now. Let me explain actually what happened. All right, now what happened was the Sikhs who immigrated to Canada and USA, they faced a lot of discrimination by the whites. Okay. And a good example is the famous Komagata Maru incident. Now, the Komagata Maru is a Japanese ship,
Yes, right.
which was actually hired by a Malayan Sikh who was from Serenda. All right, his name was Gurjit Singh. So he took 376 Punjabi passengers. Out of the 376 passengers, 340 were Sikhs. The British government in Canada did not allow the ship to land because they were following a white policy. All right. And when this ship returned to India, all right, in September 1914, 19 Sikhs were killed by the British troops. All right. So this angered the Sikhs in Malaya. And they felt that we have been loyal to you, but you're not giving us the due respect, the due recognition. All right. Because Canada was part of the British Empire, all right, we should be able to free to migrate within the British Empire. And this
Right.
awakened the Sikhs that they were being made use of by the British and all that. So this is where quite a number of Sikhs in Malaya, they were very influenced by the Gadar Party propaganda, because the Gadar Party published a newspaper, all right, which is called Gadar. Gadar means revolution, all right? And this was being circulated to the Sikhs worldwide. And the Malayan Sikhs were influenced by that. Okay, so that's why we had the Gadar Party here. Now, very interestingly, more than 100 million Sikhs, and this is interesting, more than 100 million Sikhs returned to India, all right, to join the Gadar rebellion. It failed in India, but they were willing to sacrifice their lives. All right.
Dr. Ranjit,
Yeah.
sorry, let me interject. Back to this Komagata Maru incident.
Right.
How is it that a Malaysian, Gurjit Singh, got involved with the migration of essentially Sikhs from India to Canada. What is that connection?
Okay, let me explain. Good question, Ranjit. Now, let me first state that it is not migration of Sikhs from India directly to Canada. The ship actually sailed from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
A lot of people have made that mistake. In fact, Ranjit, just to share, it's not that I'm trying to correct a lot of people's errors and all that, but even international historians, those who have not really, they do sometimes they're not meticulous enough. They also say they assume that the ship sailed from India, Calcutta. No, okay, the ship actually sailed from Hong Kong. All right, but the passengers were all Punjabis who had already migrated out of India. They were in Hong Kong, they were in Singapore, all right, they were in Philippines, they were in China, that kind of thing, all right. But of course, the China will pick on later on the way to Canada, okay. So this was the ship sailed from Hong Kong to Canada. Now, what prompted? That's a very good question. How did Gurdeep Singh get himself involved? Now, Gurdeep Singh was in Malaya when the Gadar Party was formed. He denies it, but he was also in a way anti-British. He hated the British for the discrimination, and even he was here, and he saw the discrimination here against the Tamil laborers in the rubber industry, and he used to compare. This is his own statement, Ranjit. I did not put it in my book, but very interesting. He says in Malaya, all right, the horse is treated better than the Indian laborer.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
That's a story. That's another story on another podcast one day. But it's very sad. You're right.
That's right.
And treated the South Indian laborers in the rubber estates were treated subhumanly, I would say.
Thank you, Ranjit. Yeah. Okay. So he had this anti-British thing and all that, and then he actually went to Hong Kong. But it's all coincidental. He actually went to Hong Kong to collect debts from somebody owed him money. When he was in Hong Kong, he came to know that a lot of Sikhs were dying to get into Canada. Right? And they needed a ship. He heard about this in the Hong Kong Gurdwara. So the idea came to him. He was a businessman.
A successful businessman in Malaysia.
Yeah. He was a very successful businessman. And his dream, Ranjit, was to have a direct passenger service from Canada to India. That was his dream. So he wanted this to be the test case.
Wow.
Right? So that is these are the two factors that prompted him. He was a very bold guy.
And the ship actually sailed to Vancouver, and it was stopped because of some anti-immigration policies or anti-Indian immigration policies by the Canadian authorities.
Yes, it's true. It was not allowed to even dock.
Right.
Not even allowed to dock. It stayed right in the open sea.
Right.
So it's very sad, actually. This Komagata Maru incident. Yes.
But
of course now. Sorry.
On a good note, in researching this, Justin Trudeau has apologized in Parliament not too long ago for this incident to the Sikhs of Canada.
Yes. In fact, I was about to say that.
Yeah, that's quite heartening. That's actually quite heartening that we see. Of course, Canada today, the Sikhs have done extremely well in Canada.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they're ministers and head of police and whatnot, from what I recall.
Yeah, at one time there were 4 ministers.
Wow.
Now maybe more. Yeah. At one time during Trudeau, there were 4 Sikh ministers. And the Sikhs, now since you mentioned that, Ranjit, I think the Sikhs can take pride that they're doing well throughout the world, right? In Britain, in France, all right, in Australia, because the Sikhs are very enterprising people. That is a good side of the Sikhs. Later, I will tell you the downside of the Sikhs. Okay, go ahead.
Talking about that, maybe we are moving away from your book, but actually, since you bring it up, I want to talk about one thing, which I think all Sikhs are very proud of, and many non-Sikhs have told me how amazing the Sikhs are when it comes to the langar and how they feed people around the world. And recently, They got all these oxygen tanks for people, all free of charge. And the charity of the how Sikhs are charitable. Maybe Dr. Ranjit, just give us a short snippet of maybe your experience on why Sikhs are like that.
You see, the Sikhs are very important. Ranjit, it's a very valuable question because it's part of Sikhism to do sewa.
Yeah.
All right, sewa is community service. Okay, and it's also part of Sikh religion to contribute a certain amount of your income to charity. All right, and the other thing also is the the religion teaches us, all right, that the human race is one. And that's a very important point. That's why the Sikhs, they reach out to everybody. All right, that's a good side. But let me also hint, which not many people are aware also. I won't say it's negative. There's actually a negative and positive. The negative is the Sikhs are also very individualistic. They can be very individualistic, very egoistic. All right, but that's a negative. But the positive side is in a way good. It always makes one to be one up. So if Ranjit can do it, why can't I do it? The Sikhs have this enterprising spirit in them.
Yeah.
I will be one up. Right. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah. And I must say, I mean, it's enlightening to me, and I must say that the Sikhs are very close knit, a very close knit community.
Yes, they are closely knit. They help one another. Yes. Okay, I will skip that. Go ahead. Go ahead. The next. I like to be positive.
Okay, for another day.
Okay, but Ranjit, no, let me share one thing but this is true. Let me give you a famous quotation by Datuk Mahima Singh. Okay, this is a famous quote by Datuk Mahima Singh. So let me give you the exact quote, which is very interesting. Just give me a second. Okay, this is the exact quote by Mahima Singh. As individuals, all right, Sikhs can knock anybody out, but they cannot work as a team. All right. So this is where you say, everybody wants to be the chief. Nobody wants to be the Indian. Okay. So this is the only problem that we have. Okay. And that is why it is very difficult, even until today. We do not have a single Sikh organization that can claim to be truly representative of the community. Right? But the positive side, but when there is an urgency, there is something that affects the Sikh community, then everybody will come together. But in peace times, they will not. But that's a beautiful thing about the Sikhs. All right, when the community's interests are at stake, they will come. All right, peacetime, there will always be rivalry.
Right.
Which is not negative, but not negative and positive. But whatever said and done, Ranjit, sorry, I've also got to end up positively. The Sikhs have done very well in Malaysia and other countries of the world. That I think that we can take pride. The Sikhs, you don't find Sikh beggars.
That is
the
true.
Pride. Yeah, very true. The Sikhs,
they're very private people.
Yeah.
That's true. They will work very, very hard.
Yeah. And let me end up that part of the conversation by saying that within one generation, the Sikhs in Malaysia were transformed from bullock cutters, policemen, and all that into professionals.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite self-evident. I think we'll come to that about how many successful leaders of the community in the professional area, especially.
Right.
And okay, but now wrapping up the Komagata Maru incident.
Right.
I think the ship actually went back to Kolkata. Sailed back.
Went back Baj, which is just about 20 kilometers from Kolkata. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that what happened then actually fanned a lot of anti-British sentiments. The Komagata incident
Right.
Bomagata Maru incident when they docked in Calcutta, and what the British actually did to the people on the ship itself,
Right.
right? And this fan anti-British movements in Malaya itself,
Right.
right? And I think it led to the the Gadarites persuading the Malay state guides to to
Yes.
to uprise themselves against the British. Maybe you could elaborate a bit on that. You know,
Right.
the rippling effect of and the fanning of the anti-British movement in Malaya.
Yeah. Thank you, Ramesh. Now, let me explain. This is very interesting, huh? And also, let me correct some historical inaccuracies. Now, because of the influence of the Gadar propaganda, the Sikhs in Malaya were affected. And the Gadar movement was very strong in Malaya. All right. And the chief leader, which many people, actually, people were not aware before this. I'm proud to my research has shown this. All right. The leader was none other than the famous Jagat Singh of police.
Alice.
He was the chief leader of the Gadar movement. All right. In fact, he was brought to trial by the British government.
Right.
All right.
Who
There
is the
was not
same
enough.
Jagat Singh? The same
Yes, the
Jagat Singh
Moneylender. Yes, 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 yes,
who
yes,
became the Rothschild of police.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Wow,
Correct.
from
People,
revolutionary to
yeah,
billionaire.
to billionaire.
Wow,
No, it's true.
I didn't realize it's the same Jagat Singh. I just thought common name, I mean,
Yeah,
No, no, Jagat Singh.
and there was, I think, Dr. Raj is going to talk about the trial. He was actually put on trial.
Yeah, he was put on
yeah.
trial for act of treason against the government. All right,
Yeah.
but he escaped. There was not enough evidence. All right,
Mm.
and then they sent him in detention to Singapore. His wife, Large Core, that time they had money, so they hired a good lawyer and got him out, and he was allowed to come back to police. All right, so that was the government. Now, Jagat Singh played a major role together with other guides in asking the Malay state guys not to go to the war front. Although they volunteered, the Malay state guy volunteered, but he influenced them not to go. That is one. Okay. The other thing is, Ramesh, that the Jagat Singh also influenced the Sikhs who were actually, let me explain select the historical perspective. The Malay State Guides was formed in 1896, all right, as a military regiment. Majority was Sikhs. And in 1915, all right, it was a part of the Malay State Guides, right, which is known as the Mountain Battery, was stationed in Singapore, all right, and there was a mutiny by the 5th Light Infantry Regiment. 5th Light Infantry Regiment is actually part of the British Indian Army, to which the Mountain Battery of
Was
the
attached.
Malaysian Guards was attached, all right? Now, this is where a lot of errors have occurred. That mutiny was involved 300 to 400 men of the 5th Light Infantry Regiment. Not 800. The entire regiment did not rebel, only about half. And many historians have wrongly said that the Sikhs were also involved in it.
Mm.
Now, the interesting thing is, out of 97 Sikhs who were stationed there, the Malay State Guides, out of 97, only 11 were charged. All right? And this charge was nothing very serious. Their charge was not taking part in the atrocities of the mutiny, but also having arms in their possession. Okay? And they were only given light sentences, few months
Right.
to 2 years. Okay? And let me quote, because this is important, because the court of inquiry that were established by the British. Now, this is what the court came to the conclusion, that the evidence of force having been used by the 5th Light Infantry to compel the 11 guides to participate in the mutiny is very strong and connected. That there is no shred of evidence to connect the individuals with any of the outrages or with various detachments of mutineers. So, in short, they never took any active role in the mutiny. The Sikhs were not involved.
Right.
Okay.
And how did Jagat Singh play a part in it? I mean, was he like the main? What did he actually do with the Malay state guys, or was he like doing propaganda and did he influence this?
Yes, what they did was Jagat Singh had his other group of people. He was not
Right,
alone. Okay, there were a number of Gadrites here and all that. So these Gadrites, they went over to Singapore, all right, and influenced the soldiers there. They did their
right.
own propaganda. He says, why should you go to the war front and fight for the white men? They have not been fair to you. They are killing your own brothers. All right, and that is very true, no? And the Malay state guides, when they wrote a letter, they're very interesting. When they wrote a letter to the British government, they put this as one of the reasons. And they even mentioned our fellow brothers have been butchered in the Komagatamaru incident.
Right.
All right. So why should we fight for you?
And this was in relation to the Great War of the First World War back then in the
Yes,
1950s to
yes.
1918.
1940, yeah, 1914, 1918. Yes, Ramesh.
Right. Yeah, and in addition to the influence that Jagat Singh had and the Gadar influence, there was also another strong influence of anti-British sentiment among the Sikhs in India and Malaysia or Malaya. And I believe this is called the Akali movement.
Yes, very true, Ramesh. All right. The first anti-British movement in Malaya was the Gadar movement, and the second one was the Akali movement. All right. Now
Right.
let me explain what is the Akali movement. So the Akali movement actually started in 1920 and it lasted for 5 years, 1920, 1925. It is also known as the Gurdwara Reform Movement. And now what was the movement actually about? It was a non-violent, very important, non-violent religio-political struggle by the Sikhs in India against the Mahans. Now, Mahans were the proprietors or hereditary heads of Gurdwaras. Now, what happened was, over time, because most of the Sikhs during the Mughal era and all that, and they were forced to take refuge in the jungles. So, whatever their Gurdwaras were left unattended to, and the Punjabi Hindus, all right, they took over control of the Gurdwaras. So this went through for a number of years. So the Sikhs were unhappy that they were now controlling the Gurdwaras. Okay, so the Sikhs wanted to wrest control back of these Gurdwaras, and the British, they somehow seem to be siding the Mahans. All right, so that's why the Sikhs started the peaceful demonstrations. They use in Punjabi they used to call morcha. Now morcha is a peaceful demonstration. All right, they wanted to take over control of their shrines. All right. Now, what happened in Malaya? Now, this is interesting. I would like to share this. And the Sikhs are very religious at heart. Anything that you touch about their religion, they're very emotionally attached. All right. Even until today, the Sikhs may deny it openly, but the Sikhs still keep track of what is happening in the Punjab.
Yeah.
They have their cultural links, emotional attachment, and all that, which is natural. Of course, our loyalty is to Malaysia, no doubt about it, no doubt about that loyalty to Malaysia. But the emotional, the cultural links, right? They will move. So when this was happening in India, the Sikhs in Malaya, thousands of them, it's not hundreds, more. The movement was bigger than the Gadar movement. Thousands of Sikhs used to collect funds and send these funds back to India, right, to finance the Akali movement, the morchas, right, in India. And again here, Jagat Singh was a key player.
Oh.
Yeah, he was a key player. Jagat Singh was all the way through, all right? He was a key player. But of course, the Akali movement in Malaya was led by the Singh Sabha movement. The main leader in that time was Karam Singh, who was working in the Sentul Railway Workshop, all right? So they collected funds and they did that. Now, another interesting thing which I should share.
Before you go there, before you move on from Jagat Singh, there's something I just want to ask you this.
Right.
It's some sort of myth. It's not in your book. There's some sort of myth, and I want to see where clarify this myth. You mentioned that Jagat was banished from Perlis, okay?
Yes.
In your book, and I think he went to Penang. and even the royal family was indebted to him because he was a big time moneylender. Now, the myth that I understand is that he actually told the Raja of Police that if you let me sit on your throne for one day, I will forgive you of the debt. That's a myth. So, how true is this myth? Because that's what we hear. We hear is the famous Jagat Singh saying, "I'll forgive you of your debt. Let me sit one day on the throne," and that is reason why he was banished. Is that true or exaggerated or false?
Okay, let me answer this way, Ranjit. I've also been posed this question. There are two versions. One, they say let him sit on the throne. The other one is
Okay.
let his son sit on the throne.
Okay, just as bad, lah. Just as bad.
No, I'm just sharing. All right.
Yeah.
Now, through my research, my records here, because the records here might not be complete. There's no such evidence. Okay.
Okay.
But I will tell you, I'll be coming to that later. But since you posted, I can share later. Now, Jagat Singh was actually banished from Perlis. The real reason. All right. There are two reasons. The real reason, all right, was if the British did not do that, half of Perlis will fall into his hands. Because
by way of the land collateral.
Land, all right? And
Okay.
all right, because they mortgage their lands and all that, all right? And very interesting, since you mentioned that, Ranjit, people did not mention this. It's not found in our local files. Very difficult. You cannot get Jagat Singh's files in our National Archives. Very few. The sensitive information all gone. All right. But I managed to dig from colonial records just to share with you the. Okay. About Jagat Singh. Now, this is interesting. Let me quote the exact figures. The debts owed to Jagat Singh total of 830,000. You're talking
then,
about
back then. Wow.
That's just
100 years ago.
All right, 830,000. Now, this is interesting. Out of which no less than $117,142.16 was owed by the royal family.
Whoa.
All right, so this is something that actually maybe the government, I believe I may be wrong, but they didn't want this kind of information, but managed to dig it. All right, so the real reason was, all right, Jagat Singh was a threat in police. All right, and the lands, a lot of the Malays, the rural one, they mortgage their lands. Okay, that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, the British had a disliking for Jagat Singh because he was viewed as being anti-British. They did not have enough evidence to nail him. All right, so and he was due a threat. And actually, the British High Commissioner said that it's in the best interest of the British and the people of Perlis that Jagat Singh be banished. So he was banished in 1931. All right, so that's about Jagat Singh.
And Jagat Singh was also, as you said just now, Dr. Ranjit, that Jagat Singh was also involved in the Akali movement.
Right.
And
he was.
Yeah. He financed, I guess he financed the Akali movement to a certain extent.
Yeah. Finance, yes, he did a lot. He financed. And also, sorry, Ramesh, and also to share with you, Jagat Singh is one of the Sikhs who was involved in all the anti-British movements.
Right. That leads me to my next question.
Correct. They will come to that now.
In your book, I mean, with the Akali movement and all, this also led to the Indian independence movement, which the Sikhs played an important role as well.
Yes.
Right.
That's true.
Right, and the Sikhs were involved, as you say in your book, involved in the Indian Independence League during Second World War, and it's this Indian Independence League was also very entrenched in Malaya, if I could use that words. Now, just for the sake of our viewers, how was this movement fostered in Malaya, and how big was the influence of the Indian Independence League in Malaya? I mean, I guess it just involved Subhas Chandra Bose, and the Indian National Army,
Yeah.
which were more anti-British and towards leaning towards the Japanese.
Yeah. Actually, let me give a very quick overview. The Indian independence movement in Malaya was represented by the Indian Independence League that was managed by the civilians. Okay, the military arm was the Indian National Army.
Army.
All right, Indian National Army. Yeah. So the movement became popular when Subhash Chandra Bose took over the leadership, which was in July 1943. And that time, hundreds of thousands, all right, of Indians joined the Indian National Army. All right. And the whole purpose of the Indian independence movement was to liberate India from the British. All right. And here again, of course, all the Indians played a role, but since we're talking about the Sikhs, now the Sikhs also played a major role, especially there's a gentleman called Boot Singh. Boot Singh is known as the Gandhi of Malaya. He was the second president of the Malayan Indian Congress. First president of
Wow.
John TV was the second. Yeah, he became second president, and he was re-elected again as president. We'll talk about him later. Now, what happened was, now he played a major role in the founding of Indian Independence League branches in Malaya. And for the record, Boot Singh was the one who set up the meeting of the Indians in Kuala Lumpur on 16 January 1942, which resulted in the formation of the Indian Independence League in Kuala Lumpur, and Boot Singh was made the vice president. All right, so that's the uh, respect they had for him. Okay, and also interestingly, not many people are aware that the presidents of the Indian Independence League branches in Alostar, Kulim, Kuala Kangsar, and all that, they were Sikhs. All right, so the Sikhs played a major role, and Bhagwan Singh, all right, of Gyan Singh and Company, the famous Gyan Singh and Company, all right, he donated $1 million at that time, all right, to the Azad Hind government, the independence government, okay.
Mm.
And again, Jagat Singh comes into the role again. This guy, Jagat Singh, actually is a hero in that sense, but not many
We need
people
to
are
make
aware.
a movie out of him. We need to make a
Yeah, they should.
movie.
No, they should. They should. Right? He was whatever said and done. No, he gave away his bungalow at 34
Northern
November
Street.
Penang
Yeah.
to be used as a headquarters of an Indian Independence League, and then it was later used as a spy center. Now, this is very
Well,
interesting. Again, not many people are aware that 3 million Sikhs were willing to sacrifice their life. All right, they became spies and they went over to India. All right,
Mm.
and these three Japanese 3 million Sikhs, of course, the most famous guy will come to is Amrit Singh Gill, the brother of J.S. Gill, who started off the famous sports goods store. So Amrit Singh Gill, Ram Sarup Singh, and Kehar Singh, they did espionage work in India. And Amrit Singh Gill was sentenced to death, all right, in June
in India.
1945. Yes, sentenced to death
In
in
India.
India, Calcutta conspiracy case, all right, for waging war against the King Emperor.
Wow.
But due to Mahatma Gandhi's intervention, so his death sentence was commuted to transportation for life. And while being transported from one prison to another, he managed to escape from in Calcutta and return to Malaya. All right,
He
so
came
this,
back to Malaya.
yeah, so this shows the sacrifices of the Sikhs and all that.
Mhm.
And very quickly, Ramesh, also let me talk about the Sikh women.
Yes.
They have the Sikh women in the Indian independence movement. They had the what was called the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, all right, which was formed in July 1943 in Singapore. And quite a number of Sikh women who joined the Rani of Jhansi Regiment. For example, we have Harban's Kaur, officer rank, and then we had other Sundar Kaur and Jaswant Kaur, the Sikhs, and they also, together with other Indian women, they provided healthcare, donated jewelry, and supplied food to the INA soldiers. So these are the role that the Sikh community, though small in number compared to other Indians, they contributed.
And when I think when the British came back to Malaya after towards the end of the war, and then they took control of Malaya again, they actually arrested some of these gentlemen or Sikhs who were involved in the movement itself.
Yes, that's true. And they
Right.
were held. They were in prison for a while, and then later they were released. Yes.
Yeah, and surprisingly, Jagat Singh wasn't
No, no.
wasn't arrested this time.
Right. Actually, as Ranjit said, somebody must really make a movie out of him. He was a smart guy.
He should.
No, I
He
mean,
should.
in your
Uh,
book, actually, it said that Jagat Singh actually was involved in the first meeting for the movement itself. He
Yes,
actually
yes,
got Bang Singh to get this meeting going
yes. In Penang.
in Penang.
well,
Yes, yes.
Right.
I want to jump just to jump. The reason why I jump is because you mentioned J.S. Gill. You
Right.
say Amrit Singh was J.S. Gill's brother,
Yeah.
right? Now I understand, and I'm not sure whether I'm right, that Gurchan Singh, who was also featured in your book, is another brother of J.S. Gill. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct,
True.
right?
Correct.
And this J.S. Gill is Adidas Gill, lah, the
Yes. Yes.
famous shop in Batu Road,
Jalan
now
Tunku
Jalan
Rahman.
Tunku Abdul Rahman.
That's right, Ranjit.
Right. Okay.
You know your history
Maybe-
well.
No, because the Sikh community is not that big, and I was told that Gurchan Singh was Adidas Gill's brother in that sense.
Yeah.
Now you talk about Gurchan Singh, the Singa of Malaya. Maybe you want to give us some bits about his famous exploits, which, by the way, I think you cannot find in Malaysian history books.
Thank you, Ranjit. No, I'm actually sorry. I must acknowledge Ramesh and Ranjit. You all have done solid homework. Both of you seem to know a lot. All right, and I appreciate that. Because you're asking a lot of intriguing questions, and you're also helping me to bring out the best in me. You're posing a lot of questions. All right. Now, thank you. Now, only lately, gentlemen, for the first time in the Malaysian history textbooks, has Gurchan Singh been mentioned. Only lately in the Form 4 textbook. But that too, just 2-3 sentences. All right? But let me explain how great was Gurchan Singh. And you'll be shocked with what I'll have to share about Gurchan Singh. Of course, if you have read my book, then you will not be shocked. But I'll tell you about Gurchan Singh Gill now. Why Gurchan Singh Gill occupies a special position in Malaysian history. All right. If you were to ask me Ranjit, based on your research, who among the people that you would really admire, he was one of them, and I'll explain why. All right. Now, besides being the Lion of Malaya, yes, he led the resistance movement against the Japanese. All right, during World War II. Okay. Together with both his brothers, which is Gurcharan Singh, okay, and Gurdial Singh of the Adidas fame and all that, JSG sports store. All right, they printed anti-Japanese leaflets. At that time, Japanese they wanted to negate the Japanese propaganda. The Japanese propaganda was always telling lies, so they wanted to tell the true stories about what was happening around the world when the war was occurring. All right, and they secretly distributed this pamphlet, and it was signed off as Singa.
The Singa communique.
Yes, Singa communique. Yeah. Correct. All right, Singa communique, signed as Singa. And Gurchan Singh had established a network of Japanese anti-resistance movement, more than 30 agents of all nationalities. Of all nationalities, all right? And they were so powerful that this is another thing not many people know. The Japanese offered a $100,000 reward for his captures. 100,000. Okay. Now, what many Malaysians don't know, in fact, I used to post as a quiz, who is the father of Malaysian bicycle racing?
Yeah. We know from your book, but we assume is Tan Sri Darshan Singh.
Correct.
We assume that.
Correct.
Which is also quite right. Which is also quite right in the sense that he's very much involved in cycling.
Yes, he built the first velodrome. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. But this is not known. But actually, he is. Actually, I gave him the title. When I write, I say he's the father of Malaysian bicycle racing. Now I tell you why. Because He was the founder. He was the founder and the first honorary secretary of the Malayan Cyclist Federation. All right, Malayan Cyclist Federation, which was formed in December 1953.
Mhm.
All right. Now, subsequently, he became its president, and then its successor, the Malaysian Cycling Federation. Right, there was continuity. Okay, and over and above that, now this is interesting. Not many people know he became the founder president of the Asian Cycling Federation.
Well, that's amazing.
Yes, all
That
right.
is amazing.
That's really amazing. So he actually promoted, all right? And then not to take the glory away from Tan Sri Changil, yes, Tan Sri brought it to the next level. He built the first velodrome, and we acknowledge that. But not many people are aware of the contributions of Gurchan Singh. And his name is actually Gurchan Singh. A lot of people will mistakenly put Gurcharan Singh. No, it's
Yeah,
Gurchan.
Gurchan Singh.
Gurchan, yeah, Gurchan Singh.
Yeah. And I think Gurchan Singh was also the secretary of the Malaysian Women's Football Association. Is this what you
Yes,
said?
yes.
Yeah. Right. So he has contributed in many various sports
Many.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was
And
also the Eddie Cam to Tunku Abdul Rahman.
oh,
Oh yeah, when you know when he passed away due to a road accident, Tunku Abdul Rahman came to the house for the funeral.
wow.
Yeah, so it was at that level.
Yeah. And I think this after talking about Gurchan Singh, Gurchan
Another
Singh.
movie.
Yeah, and this really fits into the next area. I mean, the contributions of Sikhs to the economy of Malaya and Malaysia, right? I mean, we saw how Gurchan Singh contributed in terms of the anti-Japanese movement, where
Right.
he had a string of spies, like including one Sri Lankan Malay. I think he was executed, D'Souza or something along his name, and he
Yeah.
also had the Sikhs as his spy network as well. But he contributed economically and to sports as well.
Right.
Of course, we know about Jagat Singh, but and I think that's nicely sits into the other than the police force, the Sikhs also contributed economically to the country. Maybe you
Yes.
could elaborate a bit on that aspect.
Thank you, Ramesh. Now, another important historical fact, not appreciated. I have to emphasize on this, not appreciated, but it is very important. All right, and in fact, it should be in our history books. Okay, let me explain. I'll take some time to explain this very important fact. You see, from the 1880s until 1920s, the main mode of road transport in British Malaya actually was bullock carts. All right, you never had lorries, motorized vehicles, and all that. So it was bullock carts. All right, and a vast majority of the owners of bullock carts and the drivers themselves were Sikhs. And in the early development of the tin mining and the rubber industry, all right, the main means of transport were bullock carts. So the Sikhs actually contributed to the early development of the tin mining, all right, and rubber industry, which actually contributed to the economic development of Malaya, because those were the two main exports at that time.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
this,
I
this
pause you there, Dr. Ranjit. I pause you there.
Yeah.
I am told that my maternal great grandfather was
Right.
a bullock cart driver in Batu Gajah, from Batu Gajah. That's where they come from. So
Batu Gajah, I
Batu
will say
Gajah.
it is a fortress of the Sikhs.
Yeah, it
All right,
is.
the
It is.
Perak, yeah, it's a fortress. That area, all right. And not many people know also that there were bullock carts with 6 wheels.
Oh,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
No, somebody did a drawing. I could not find one, but you know why? They carried the logs of wood, heavy
Yeah.
stuff. All right, and so that was very important. And
Ancient trailer.
Yeah. Okay, and also let me finish out this part. You see, the Sikhs. Not only that, so they were, when the motorized vehicles came over, the Sikhs were also enterprising. Then they started taking part, all right, in the lorry transport industry and also the buses, all right. And this is interesting. 70% of the bus companies in Negeri Sembilan in the 1920s late 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 70% were owned by Sikhs.
Wow.
All right. And there were a lot of very famous Sikh lorry transporters nearer to us in Old Klang Road. You know, the famous IST, Indra Singh Transport. All right, Indra Singh. And Ranjit, here just to share, he doesn't even know how to sign. He became a multimillionaire from a driver to an entrepreneur of lorries. You know, this is how the Sikhs really progress.
No, and recently, Dr. Ranjit, I came across a lorry and it had Malhi transport. So I was waiting for today to ask you. This was about 3-4 weeks ago. Any connection?
No, sir.
No, all right. Just
I wish I had.
I was
Officially,
really
no.
tickled.
Officially, no connection.
No.
You never know. You never know.
Unofficially, also
never know.
no. All right.
For another time, and another day, and another forum. Yeah, and you were mentioning about lorries and from bullock carts transition to lorry and bus transportation itself, Dr. Ranjit. And of course, back then with the tin mining and even oil palm industry being very was booming at that point in time. The Sikhs also went into other forms of economy. I think dairy farming, in fact, including watchmen. I think interestingly enough, if I remember my school days, the Jaga, as we call them, was this big burly Sikh guy, and they're so friendly and they're so fatherly, right? They'll make sure that you cross the road, and I think that a lot of us have those memories, the Jagas back then. And
yes,
and
go ahead.
Why? I mean, what really amazed us is that amazed me is that the Sikhs were in all forms of economical life in Malaya.
Right. Let me give a brief explanation. You see, the Sikhs, when they immigrated to Malaya, their first choice was to join the paramilitary force.
Yeah.
Okay. So those Sikhs who failed to join that, they took other occupations, and one of them, which was very popular, was to become a watchman. All right. And this actually is closely related with the paramilitary force because the Sikhs are known for their bravery, reliability, honesty, and all that. All right. So the Sikhs, they were employed in government departments, hospitals, and all that, and also in the private sector, the banks, estates, and all that. Okay, and they were proven to be very reliable. And let me tell you, this is very very interesting quotation. A Sikh jaga, whether asleep or awake, is enough to deter any robber.
Yeah.
Okay, whether asleep or awake, this is a very famous thing. That's how they were just scared.
And I must also say, if you look at our recent retired CPO, Dato Amar Singh, you will see why you will be scared because he's a giant strapping man. I mean, 6'5" at least.
Yeah. All right. And just to share, very interesting. This also not many people are aware, but very interesting. You know the Ku Kongsi Temple in Penang.
Yes,
the famous temple in Penang. They have a statue of a Sikh watchman.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. So whatever, to deter. And interesting, in Singapore, it was not found in Malaya, but in Singapore, the rich Chinese, especially in Bukit Brown Cemetery, all right, their tombs are guarded by Sikh statues of Sikhs.
Statues.
Yeah. Everlasting security.
and the Jaga legacies live on.
Correct. That's a very good one, Ramesh. That's an excellent one. Right? So that was that. All right. Then I was also, if I can just proceed. Also, okay, very interesting. A Sikh watchman was almost always a
male.
Take a guess. Testing your history now. In a good mood. Huh?
A former ex-military.
Moneylender. Correct.
Moneylender.
Yeah, okay. Then what we know?
Right.
Outside the bank, because Standard Chartered Bank in Penang
Right.
had a Sikh watchman. And payday, right? They
Right.
will all line up and he okay, bring your safety
Yeah.
boots. And
Yeah.
here we
True. True. All right.
yeah. Remember that very famous
All right.
gentleman.
All right.
They were money
And
lenders.
there were, in fact, there were about 10,000 at one time. All right. 10,000
Wow.
Sikh money lenders. Yeah. In the early 1930s, 1940s. Yes. Okay. And
Ramesh,
money
do you
lending was,
remember?
yeah,
Sorry,
money lending.
doctor.
Sorry. Yeah.
Do you remember those days when court was in town, Selangor Club?
Right.
What was that Chinese restaurant we used to go there for breakfast? I can't remember. Seng Nam.
Seng Nam. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
First floor Seng Nam, every Tuesday or Thursday, all the Sikhs will gather. There'll be like one general meeting, of tontine and money lending and all that. Yeah, something like that. I remember that.
Putu and tontine. Yeah. It's very true.
Yeah, they were doing that.
Right.
I remember that.
All right. And this is a true story. Yeah. It was not uncommon for the bank manager to actually borrow money from the Sikh Jaga. That's true story. And this happened in Segamat. It's a true story. It was a Chinese bank manager. No, it is documented. It was a Chinese bank manager. He and the Sikh Jaga had the same car, same brand, same model. Right? And one day the manager walked to the wrong car. The Sikh Jaga, itu saya punya kereta. Right? So these are the stories of the watchmen and all that. And of course, the most famous Sikh moneylender was Jagat Singh.
Yes.
All right. So all right. Now dairy farming. All right. Maybe I can just round up. The next occupation the Sikhs were involved was dairy farming. All right. And this is interesting, gentlemen. Until the mid 1930s, the dairy industry in Malaya was controlled by the Sikhs. Until 1930s, before the European dairies came in. All right. And the Sikhs played a major role. And the Sikhs actually, they were smart. They did both. Bullock cutting and dairy farming went together to an extra income. So you're a bullock cutter, you also kept cows and buffaloes. Yeah. Okay.
Those days we used to get milk from the Sikh delivery man. Those days.
Yes. In aluminium cans. Yeah, bottles.
Yeah, pour in bottles. Yeah.
Correct.
I remember.
Morning, once in the morning, once in the evening, afternoon. All right. So dairying was also big. Now, the next point, this is interesting. I had a shock of my life. I was not aware. This was an eye-opener for me, because sometimes historian, you also learn things. Not many Sikhs themselves are aware that thousands of Sikhs were involved in the tin mining industry.
Yeah, that's something we are not aware. We always think it's a Chinese dominated,
dominant,
especially the labor and also the capital. The capital is either Chinese or European, but the labor was predominantly Chinese, Hakka Chinese. That's what we understand.
Okay, now this is what my research uncovered. Especially in Perak and Selangor, all right? Thousands of Sikhs, they worked as laborers, foremen or overseers, winchmen, watchmen, and dredge masters, a few of them, all right, in tin mines, but particularly the dredgers owned by the Europeans, all right? And in the Chinese-owned tin mines, Ranjit, the Sikhs they were involved in all the tough work. All right, carrying buckets of ore, carrying all right, stones and all that, because they were burly, So they played a very important role. All right, and in fact, it's so important that almost wherever there was a Sikh mining settlement, there were gurdwaras. They set up the gurdwaras. All right, in fact, the whole stretch in Perak, Batu Gajah, Trono, Pusing, Kampar, all right, all Sikh laborers were there. Okay, so that's one. All right. And moving quickly, of course, some Sikhs, but very, very minimal. A few Sikhs were involved in agriculture. All right. And these were those Sikhs who were discharged from the Malay state guides. The government gave them land. The British government was in Malaya was quite fair to the Sikhs. They gave them free land, and the Sikhs own acres ranging from 20 to 100 acres. Okay, and they planted mainly rubber. So a few of them were involved. Okay, and some Sikhs, of course, they had large estates. And maybe I can give one example. This is the famous Guru Nanak rubber estate at the 9 Mile Jalan Cheras, Jalan Cheras, Ulu Langat, was 500 acres in size. First decade of the 20th century. All right. And okay, and then there were others who own, but very negligible amount compared to other races. Huh? And if I may just move on, gentlemen, just to finish off the economic development. Okay, and then textiles. Of course, you have the famous Gyan Singh and Company.
Dancing. Yep.
Gyan Singh and Company, yeah, which has been the talk of KL and all that. In fact, it was established in 1923, around 1923, by Hardyal Singh. Why it was special? Actually, it was the first, let me quote, the first Asiatic undertaking of its kind, which catered to almost every need of men and women. So it was really like a modern departmental store. It was a hit. All right. So Hardyal Singh was really very visionary in that sense. And then in 1934, he opened a branch in Singapore. And then, of course, the other one is in Jalan Tengku Rahman. I think his children still around in Kuala Lumpur and they're doing very well. Is T. Havela Singh and Sons along Jalan Tengku Rahman, where they later ventured into property development. And I will mention one more special. In fact, this guy has been featured regularly in the Facebook recently, where you have the famous tailoring shop in Ipoh. It is called US Peter. Now, when people say, why, for Sikh, yeah, he's a Sikh guy. The guy's name who started was Pratap Singh. He established it in 1936. Now, why the name US Peter? Very interesting. US stands for his father's name, Udham Singh. So short form US. And why Peter? Because his name was Pratap Singh, and the Chinese lady whom he was working for formerly could not pronounce his name correctly. So she used to call him Peter. Right? So Pratap became Peter. Right? Udham Singh became US. So the name was US Peter. And he had, now this is interesting, he had 12 tailors those days.
Wow.
And his main clientele were the orang putih themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So these are...
but you find that there are many Sikh tailors in Bangkok.
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
I'm not sure why, but...
we call them the blue turban, Ranjit.
Oh, okay. They're
all blue turban.
All blue turban.
They are we call them the Aurora businessmen. They're very, Aurora, they're very successful businessmen. They're called the blue.
And I think this nicely leads us to the, when we talk about the Sikh community in terms of economy, everybody knows the sporting goods shop.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I think nicely setting is set for that. So maybe just a brief, introduction and how fast it grew and how big it grew. I mean, back then, if we talk about Adidas, we talk about GS Gill.
GS Gill.
Yes. Now, to be fair, of course, GS Gill was the most prominent among them. But to be fair, before him, there were also other sporting Sikhs who were involved in the sporting industry, sport goods industry. All right, it's good to also mention the name because you know what, Ranjit, I've also received some feedback. You say, Ranjit, sometimes you are biased. You don't mention everybody. All right. So, Sikhs sometimes very susah. They say, why you never mention my father's company? Why you never mention? All right. So, banyak susah. So I say, okay lah. So we had others. I'll come to JS Gill, but there were others, Kukreja and Company, which actually still exists now. They're still in business.
Mm-hmm.
Another famous one was Stanley and Company. And then
Stanley
also
and Company.
Yeah, Stanley and Company.
Stanley Company is Sikh.
Yeah, Sikh guy was near the current Pertama complex.
No,
the area there.
Yes, the name Stanley, you don't assume. It's like US Peter lah. It's not a name.
Yeah. He was a Sikh guy, Stanley and Company. Oh. And then you had Naha and Company, all right, Hardyal Singh and Company. So a number of Sikhs involved. But of course, the most successful was JS Gill now. Now, JS Gill, Gurdial Singh Gill, now he founded the company in 1946. He just started as a very small shop. Very small shop, very humble beginnings. All right, and then it grew. Now, how did it grow? As you mentioned, Ramesh, he really went all out, and he got the sole distribution right, all right, franchise for Adidas. He really boomed. All right, and he was also a smart businessman. He had the money, he was really successful, but he played a major role. Now he promoted sports development in Malaysia. All right, he worked very closely with the Olympic Council of Malaysia. And in fact, in the words of Yang Amat Mulia, Tunku Tan Sri Imran, Tunku Tan Sri Imran, the former president of Olympic Council of Malaysia. Now, his own words, he says J.S. Gill played a huge role in Malaysia's sports development, all right, through his generous sponsorship of sportswear and equipment, all right, for Malaysian sportsmen and sportswomen. So that is his legacy.
Yeah.
All right, he passed away a few years. And in fact, there's a book written in his honor. I went for the book launch. J.S. Gill, he has done well, and he has also been a philanthropist. So God bless.
Yes, and I think this with the sporting goods now, this leads us to another part of your book, the contribution of Sikhs to the Malaysian sports world.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
and I think maybe we can start off with the first and only Malaysian Test cricketer.
Yes, the great Lal Singh.
Yes.
All right. Now, Lal Singh he occupies a special place in the history of Malaysian Sikhs. All right. He is the first and only Test cricketer. All right, and he achieved that by playing for India. All right, in 1932. Okay, and this is interesting. In the words of the former England skipper, A.E.R. Gilligan, this is how he described Lal Singh: the best fielder in the game and one of the best 25 all-rounders. And those who know cricket well, they always will quote John Wisden's Cricketer's Almanac. For 1932, Lal Singh was named as Cricketer of the Year.
Wow.
Yes, Cricketer of the Year. Okay, so that was his achievement. Okay, and he was at that time very famous. There even a rose named after him.
Wow.
A rose,
Yes,
the flower rose.
Yes, rose, yes, flower rose named after him. All right, and let me share his also other achievements. The first Sikh in the world to have played Test cricket. First Malayan to appear at the international scene in any sport. Now, this is also interesting. The only cricket player to have scored 2 centuries, 138 runs in 1931 and 118 runs in 1904 in the FMS colony matches. There are no matches between FMS and Singapore. All right. So that is Lal Singh.
He was a fielder and a batsman, all-rounder. All-rounder.
Yeah. But Ranjit, I think he was more well known as a fieldsman. More famous for that.
And there's also a Lal's corner in the long bar, if I recall, the Royal Selangor Club.
Yes, Lal's corner in this one, and the Lal's terrace in Club Aman. Club Aman has also recognized the achievements. Yeah, right. All right. And until today, there's a North-South trophy. It's called Lal Singh Trophy in honor of him.
Okay. North-South, as in North Malaya Sikhs playing?
Yes, correct. South
okay. South, wow.
Yeah, still on. It is still on. All right. Now, the other thing, gentlemen, this is interesting. In fact, before I wrote the book, even the Malaysian Sikhs were not aware of this. The early champion cyclists, 1930s, 1940s, were Sikhs. All right. And just to give some example, you have Pal Singh, who was the Malayan, Pal Singh, who was Malayan cycling champion for a record of 6 consecutive years, 1933 till 1938. It's a major feat. Right? That was Pal Singh.
Cycling all the trunk roads of Perak, I think, must be.
Those were having the bumpy roads, man.
Yeah. All right. And then Amrit Singh Gill the same guy who went to India as a spy, all right, he became the best all-round road champion in 1937. Okay, and then another very famous Sikh was Avtar Singh. All right, he was still a schoolboy, and he became a Malaysian cycling champion. All Malayan cycling championship in 1947, he won. All right, so that means the Sikhs were forced to reckon with in cycling. Huh? Now, when I ask this question to the Sikhs, who is the only Sikh to become the National Sportsman of the Year? They cannot give me the answer.
Who?
Take a guess. Who?
No, Nashata Singh. No, who?
That's what they'll say. Nashata Singh, Santok
So we
Singh.
know. I mean, currently we know, of course, Nashata Singh, right? We know if it's sports person Rani Kaur. Another
Ranjit Singh.
Yes, you got it, brother.
Karanjit Singh. He's a world flying Sikh.
Rally driver, the World Cup rally
Yes.
driver.
All right, now this is interesting. He became a world champion. All right, in the FIA Production Car World Rally Championship in 2002. All right.
The Paris Dakar race also, I believe he took part in. Also, the most
Yes. All right.
most difficult rally in the world.
Yeah, he was known as the Flying Sikh, and actually, until today, he's the only Asian to become a world champion in motorsports racing. All right, and he's the only.
I recall another Sikh. Sorry, I recall another Sikh, but Kenyan Joginder Singh. I can't remember whether I'm right or wrong.
Also car rally. Yes.
Rally,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Very famous in Africa. Wow, your knowledge very good, Ranjit.
No, it's just that you read and read. Once you get old like me, right, you read a lot.
All right.
Now, also called a Flying Sikh or something like that, lah. Something like that.
Yeah. Now, the only Sikh woman to become the Malaysian Sportswoman of the Year.
Must be Rani Kaur.
Rani Kaur. All right. She was a prolific goal scorer, and she was a captain of the Malaysian women's hockey team. The one we respect, Rani Kaur. She has done well. All right, and then to me, he would be the most prominent Sikh athlete. All right, the only guy to win a gold medal at the Asian Games level. Of course, our great Datuk Nashata Singh Sidhu. All right.
Yeah.
And he also actually is a double international because he represented the nation at rugby. This, I think we should mention, at the Asian Games in Bangkok, 1966, Nashata won the gold in the men's javelin with the games record. This is a major achievement, 72.92 meters.
Wow.
Right? So that one, I salute him as an athlete. Then, of course, football, you have Datuk Santok Singh, all right, well-known footballer. And one person that sometimes we tend to forget, he was also a great guy, but he was from Sabah. Do you know who is this guy, Ranjit, an athlete from Sabah? Any idea?
Not at all.
I give you a hint. His goat was Claire, K-L-E-R. All right.
Also don't know.
Don't know, Okay, this guy was also another great athlete, but not given enough publicity. Dilbag Singh Clare. All right, K-L-E-R. Now, he represented Malaysia in the 3,000 meters steeplechase at the 1964 Tokyo Olympic Games. Now, Dilbag Singh Clare, he was a gold medalist for the 3,000 meters steeplechase for the games, for a record number of years from 1965 till 1969. And his record of 9 minutes 27 seconds stood for so many years. All right, and he was from Sabah. Okay, and of course the other athletes, good cricketers, all right, Dato' Amarjit Singh Gill, all right, Guru Charan Singh and all that. But these are the main prominent ones. And just a side issue, just share, Ranjit. When people ask about my book, they say, "Oh, very good, very well researched book. Hey, how come this is missing? How come you never mention this hockey player?" I say, I can't mention all lah. Just because you play hockey I'm just sharing. You play hockey for the nation, so to write about you.
Yeah.
So
Ranjit Singh was our former captain. Ranjit Singh. I mean, you can't write about everything. You got to pick the prominent ones and
Right. So
Yeah.
that's the one.
I mean, you can probably write a book about the hockey players themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's so
There's
many.
so
So
many,
yeah.
you know.
So I
Talking
had a
about
cutoff point. Yeah.
no, talk about prominent people. Let's have a short chit chat about the Karam Singh Veria.
Wow. Thank you, brother. You
Huh?
being a lawyer.
No, okay. Let's talk about him. Youngest MP in Malaysia, and the list goes on and on. Just I leave the floor to you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Ranjit.
Thank you. All right. Now, in fact, when FMT they contacted me, they say, Ranjit, who is one Sikh that you have the highest respect for? All right. And to my mind, that's why they carried the first story was Karam Singh Viraya. Now, what is so special about Karam Singh Viraya? All right. Now, Karam Singh Viraya was a brilliant lawyer. Okay. Now, this one I'll speak off from my heart. Nah. He was a brilliant lawyer who could have made a fortune, tons of money, but he chose to fight for the poor and the workers. All right. He never owned a car, Ranjit. This I did not put in my book in detail. Never owned a car. He always traveled by bus, by cab. He never had even a house property. All right. And how many lawyers will be willing to do that? Now, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh? He passed his law, all right, qualified as a lawyer at age 19.
And
Age
couldn't
19.
practice because he was too young or something like that.
Correct. Couldn't practice at that time until the age of 21. Okay. And at the age of 22, he became the youngest elected MP in newly independent Malaya. All right. He was elected MP for Damansara and at the same time a state assemblyman for Serdang. All right. Now, another thing, because I managed to interview his siblings, all right, and his relatives. Now, I did not want to cover this too much in my book, but his secret dream, I don't want to include in my book because it's a bit controversial. Huh? His secret dream was to become the Prime Minister of India.
Well, that's a very big dream.
Yes, very big dream. Ranjit, you know what he did? All right. He actually left for India around April 1965 together with his wife and 2 children. Okay. And in India, he created history. He was the first person who organized the first union for police officers in New Delhi. Nobody could do it. He did it. And it was a threat to the Indian government. So what did they do? They expelled him.
Banned him. They banned him back to Malaysia.
Send him back to Malaysia. He came back. He came back to Malaysia. He started
And he was
again.
arrested. He was arrested in Malaysia.
Correct. ISA for 4 years.
ISA.
Okay. All right. And as I said, that was his dream. And what did he do after that? He left again for India in May 1993. And he died there. He was a socialist.
He was a legend. He was a legend.
No, he was a legend, no?
I think Ramesh will remember, certainly my time when we were young, junior lawyers, every bar AGM, everybody is waiting for Karam Singh to stand up.
Yeah.
Because he will come, he will stand up, he will whack the bar. Anybody in power, he will whack. Right?
Yes. And he even Karpal Singh Deo also.
Yeah, he whacked. And he whacks with such hilarity also, It's serious, comical at the same time. We all wait for him, We clap him, he gets the biggest rapturous applause. Those days, we remember him very fondly.
Yep.
I must admit, I'm a much junior member of the bar compared to Ranjit, my co-host. So I have to say that I had the opportunity of hearing the late Mr. Karam Singh.
Little known fact, because he fought so hard, even in his later life, he was sentenced to contempt of court. I think he went in for
Yes.
Sentence 3 months.
Yes.
3 months.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
He
Yeah.
I
was
3
mean, those
months.
are in the reported annals of
he went in for
our
months.
reports. Yeah.
The original sentence was 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. And he stood firm, he refused to apologize. All he did
Yep.
to do was apologize because the judges, Harun Hashim, if I'm not mistaken, he really didn't want to do it, but what to
Yeah.
do lah?
Yep. He's a very brave man. All right. Now, Karpal Singh Dio, Tiger of Jurutong, is so well known. All right. So,
Of course.
so well known. But one thing about Karpal Singh Dio, I always remember a very famous speech he made in Parliament. Jangan main-main dengan perlembagaan.
Yeah. Which is correct.
All right, don't play. That one you respect Karpal Singh for that. No, he championed the federal constitution. All right, he championed that Malaysia is a secular state. So that one you got to respect the man. He really fought. And civil liberties and all that. And let me just quote. I mean, that's the best I can do when it comes to Karpal Singh. He got so many achievements. But in the words of Datuk Ambiga Srinivasan, Parliament will never be the same without Karpal. All right, a prominent lawyer giving him that kind of credit, So he's so well known and all that. Okay, now let me just quickly move on to Datuk Dr. Kesh Mahinder Singh. Not very well known, but he occupies a special place because he was an internationally renowned ophthalmologist who actually played the major role. He was a force behind the establishment of the Tun Hussein On National Eye Hospital. He was a primary force. And for the record, he was the first Malaysian to obtain the fellowship of the Royal College of Surgeons for Ophthalmology in 1957. All right, also special. And then very quickly, we have Gurnam Singh, who was a trade unionist extraordinaire. He served with distinction as the president of the National Union of Teachers from 1963 till 1974. And also president of NUTP, National Union of the Teaching Profession, 1976 till 1978. Now, these are some of the prominent people. Now, the last one, I almost left him out of the book. I must tell you this story, very interesting. I almost left him out of the book until my editor, all right? Now, I must say my editor, K.N. Krishnadas, he's gem of an editor, all right? He really contributed to the quality of my book, and I acknowledged that during my book launch. He said, Ranjit, aren't you missing out someone? I said, who? He said, he's a very prominent guy. How come? I've read his book. So he mentioned Gurmeet Singh. All right, our Mr. Environment Singh. Yeah. So Gurmeet is our most famous Malaysian environmental crusader. All right. So I said, I'm very sorry. And the last part of my book, I had to spend some delay of publication. I started doing research on him. All right. And he was he is very committed even until today. And because of him, among his major victories, the government had to cancel the Tembeling hydroelectric dam, Taman Negara. All right. And also the Asian Rare Earth Sindiran Berhad Operation Bukit Merah, Perak. All right. Which was meant to store low-level radioactive wastes. So he played a major role, environmentalists and all that. So these are some of the prominent Sikhs.
We remember him as Mr. Cyclist because he didn't own a car.
He wore the mask, right?
And he cycled everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, back to cycling. It all goes back to cycling and the Sikh prowess in cycling.
I'm also told that he sold his only car and he never traveled after either cycle or take bus.
And I think this, I think also for us who does practice industrial law, Gurnam Singh.
Yeah.
Gurnam Singh also a trade unionist.
Yeah. I mentioned this now, I've spoken about him.
The trade unionist.
The former trade unionist, and he played a very important role in the trade unions and the formation of trade unions in the country as well.
Yes.
And but I must say that this has been very, very enlightening, and very, in fact, I think we could go on and and I still think we haven't covered quite a lot as well. But I think we have, I think, reached almost the limit of our time.
Yeah.
Our producers will be asking Ramesh, Ranjit, it's knocking at us already. But once again, Dr. Ranjit, thank you very much for allowing us to interview you. And it's been very, very educational for me, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of Ranjit as well.
Of course, and yeah, sorry,
Ranjit, go on, please.
I think that the end where I think Malaysians have to thank you for writing this book, apart from whatever else you've written, because it needed a book to put all of it together into one encyclopedia, so to speak.
Right.
Easy reference for not only Sikhs, for everyone, just to read it and see how, because no one knew that how important how big the Sikhs were in the transport industry, for example. We always know police, army, watchmen, we know, but the transport industry, the bullock cart industry,
the mining industry.
The mining industry. You've opened our eyes. Thank you very much.
And I think for the young people of Malaysia, we are already almost 60 years in independence, and we're still learning new things about our history.
Yes.
And it's important that we have many races and religions in this country. Everyone contributed towards the country, and it's good that we have your book, Dr. Ranjit. And this book, as you say, is based on first-hand history, first-hand knowledge, and it's well researched, I must say. I'm sure it took you a long time to write this book.
It has been a pleasure talking to both of you, and I must say, both of you gentlemen did your homework. You asked a lot of intriguing questions. You kept me on my toes. All right, kept me on my toes, and I greatly appreciate. And also, for the record, this is the longest interview that I ever had.
Oh, please don't say that.
But on an end note, the final note, we will say, Ramesh and I will say to you, thank you for not doing law. Thank you for doing this.
You read that part. Yes. But sometimes I thought I would have made a damn good lawyer. Because
no, you would. You would have.
That, right?
You know what? But there are many Sikh lawyers. They're so, you throw a stone, you hit a Sikh lawyer. The stone bounces off, hits another Sikh lawyer. But you don't see any Sikh historians.
Historian, yeah. I'm glad. I'm glad, Ranjit and Ramesh. Yes, I'm proud. All I want to say is, this is my contribution to the nation, contribution to my community. As you rightly put, we have in one book, which is a comprehensive history of the community based on authoritative sources. That's my humble contribution. All right, thank you. It has been a pleasure talking to both of you.
I just round up to say it is our honor and our privilege to have spoken to you today, Dr. Ranjit.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the whole Boleh group and the whole Boleh production team as well. Thank you very much.